Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me to talk about what has been an incredible and successful year here at Boston Partners in Education. It is very bittersweet for me to be wrapping up my year of service as a Highland Street AmeriCorps Ambassador of Mentoring, but I am very excited to be able to present to you what I set out to do for the organization this year, what I learned during my time here, and what recommendations I have for Boston Partners moving forward. First, I'm going to go through my project scope, which shaped and defined the work I did throughout the 10 months of my service. This project scope was created before I was onboarded at Boston Partners, and it was based on findings from the previous year's work by the program team. As you can see, it falls into 3 main buckets, the first being program team support. I supported the program team from start to finish in the volunteer process, from recruitment to evaluating our program and every step in between. The next bucket is focusing in on the whole class program. We really didn't know much about this before I started, and we wanted to see what the impact was. My biggest focus out of the whole school volunteer program was the whole class portion. And finally, volunteer engagement. We had a very specific goal in mind to recruit more mentors from the Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan neighborhoods, as those are our targeted neighborhoods of service and areas where our supports are needed the most. So in addition to generally supporting volunteers and how to engage with volunteers, I spent time focusing in on those specific targeted neighborhoods. Of course, all of these objectives did not happen all at once, and not even in a chronological order, which is why I thought it would be very helpful to show my timeline of service in a more visual manner. Here you can see where certain objectives overlap. For instance, I was still getting my feet wet in the organization while being onboarded and picking up recruitment and starting to focus on how to recruit mentors for our programs. Then moving on to screening and matching, which kind of happened simultaneously, and then supporting, which happened right as soon as matching happened. As you can see, evaluation didn't occur until slightly after we began supporting our matches and finding out more information about them. And finally, reporting and recommending, which is what I'm doing here now. To start off with recruitment, we did have a goal this year to recruit more mentors from the Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan area. This is a map of academic mentors' addresses, where they live in Boston or outside of Boston, compared to schools where we still have some outstanding student nominations. What this means is that there are still students at these schools that are not being matched. However, we are able to get some support into those schools. What we're seeing here is that a lot of the blue volunteer addresses do not necessarily align with the red unfilled nominations. So what this means is that we are having slightly a difficult time recruiting members from the communities in which the students are living and going to school. This makes it tricky to not only reflect the population of students that we are serving by matching them to mentors more like them, but also in terms of availability and location and getting volunteers from outside of Boston to come into Boston being slightly more difficult than volunteers or mentors who are right in the area. And so this kind of proves the idea that we are lacking in mentors from the Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan neighborhoods. That being said, some recruitment recommendations are to create a written, targeted recruitment process. This will really hone in on those target neighborhoods, identify key members in the community who we can reach out to, organizations, venues, businesses we can be connected with in order to strengthen our ties there. Community outreach events, which can stem from our written targeted recruitment process, events in which we are reaching out to the community, getting to know people, having them know about us, not necessarily asking for their recruitment in return. Because not every event we have is going to result in recruitment, and that's okay, as long as we know that other people are knowing about us. Academic mentors as ambassadors. This comes from the idea that nobody understands the impact and the worth of the work that we're doing in these programs as much as our own academic mentors. And who better to speak about that at recruitment events than our academic mentors? We should really be utilizing that resource since it is a very plentiful resource. I definitely think we need to leverage BPS partnership better. We have been working with the Boston Public Schools only for our entire existence, and so by being the only district that we work with, we want to make sure that the district is recognizing us as one of their most important partners. By further communicating the expectations we have around that partnership, we should hopefully get better recognition and better support from BPS to improve and expand our programs. Marketing materials. We are already in the process of creating new marketing materials that better align with our new improved programming and the language that we use to describe our programs. However, I definitely wanted to enforce that this is a great recruitment technique in order to better communicate what volunteers are expected to do, what this opportunity looks like, and what the benefits are from each aspect of the program. Next in the process is training. This diagram shows not only how different, but how very similar an elementary literacy training would be to a whole class training. Now, we don't have a whole class training currently. The reason for this is we do not have enough whole class mentors at one time to put them in a training. However, we are generally certain of whether or not a volunteer is interested in kindergarten, first, or second grade before their training. And so there is a good chance that they may be put into a whole class option because those are the most common at that grade level. That being said, there are some missing elements from the general elementary literacy training in which a whole class focus could include. For instance, more resources on early childhood development. How do younger children adapt to their environment? How do they learn? And how is their brain developing? Including multiple subjects, because at this level, the academic focus is not as intense and there tends to be a lot of transition between subjects. And also just being able to handle group dynamics. Knowing that you won't be focused on one student or one group of students for the whole year, being able to flexibly transition from one group or activity to another is a very helpful skill. All of these things can be included in the elementary literacy training because they are all useful skills for any academic mentor at that level. So with that, recommendations would be to increase those whole class resources, allow everyone at the elementary level to have access to those resources, increasing early childhood development resources. This will allow volunteers to better understand how children are thinking and growing at certain age levels and at certain grade levels, how to identify certain behavior, certain learning curves, etc. Incorporating cultural competency elements. Dealing with a whole class is a lot different than working with one student, and so you're interacting with a lot of different faces, walks of life, cultures, languages, etc. Being able to more appropriately tailor your support to different students will be very helpful. And finally, we need to incorporate teacher voice. What I mean by this is that we need to be more explicit about what teachers expect of our academic mentors in the training, whether that's through a video or a survey or even an in-person conversation. Teachers have a lot of valuable information for our academic mentors, and the closer we can get to providing them with that information, the better they will be at supporting their classroom. Next up, match and support. So these two things pretty much go hand in hand, as you could see in my timeline. As soon as we match, we begin supporting. This year, we made a few changes to our match support system, and what we saw was great results. For instance, we incorporated a match check-in system into our Salesforce database so that each match could be recorded on their record so that we knew what was happening about each match. That ended up giving us much better data quality and much better match quality. But for next steps, I think we could take it a little bit further, increase the amount of those check-ins, perhaps monthly, and maybe thinking about different ways to reach out. Maybe a phone call might be what a volunteer needs in order to have a longer conversation in detail about their match. Another objective we accomplished this year was increasing our communications and our events. We had a lot of different opportunities that we were able to reach out to our volunteers and include them in, from games at the TD Garden to different contests. And what we saw there was, once again, huge increase in the response rate and in the quality of our conversations with volunteers. So much so that our AMP attendance this year was 2 times greater than last year. And so I think that we need to continue to identify those ways to interact with our volunteers, to understand what they are interested in doing, how they are interested in mingling with one another, maybe even introducing an online platform where everyone has access to each other and can utilize each other as resources. Some other recommendations I have for match support would be non-cohort model support sessions. Our support sessions don't always have to be based on grade level and subject matter. For instance, a lot of our volunteers work with English language learners, and having a support session for those folks would be very helpful, whether they were in high school or elementary school. Once again, monthly check-ins and maybe a phone call follow-up if we don't get a response. That way we know we are trying our very hardest to get the information we need about the matches and to support our volunteers as best as we can. I also think that each new academic mentor should be observed throughout their first year to understand how the training prepared them to be in the classroom and maybe what support they need as a new mentor coming into the classroom. Introducing an online platform. There are so many different ways in which volunteers can interact virtually, and I think that this is something we can really take advantage of. Because our volunteers are from all over the city, they don't always get the chance to interact with one another face to face. Many of them don't even know each other, even if they're in the same school. And so by allowing some space for our volunteers to interact with one another, I think would be a very low maintenance method to further engage and outreach with our volunteers. Our match closure process. We all know that our program runs from the beginning of the school year until the end of the school year. We hope that academic mentors are thinking about that as well. But from a week-to-week basis, sometimes it can slip the volunteer's mind. And by gently reminding them throughout the year of the match closure process and that this is something that they need to be aware of and mindful of in order to make sure that the match closes successfully, that will be helpful for us in our match closure process. Now for evaluating and reporting. The whole class program is very difficult to evaluate. The reason for that is because it is a lot more difficult to compare one classroom to another than it is to compare one student with a mentor to a student without a mentor. That being said, I do think that it is possible to evaluate this program and to figure out what impact it has on the younger students at those grade levels. Here are some numbers from this past year, and as you can see, all of these numbers are a decrease from last year, reflecting a decreased focus on the whole class program. What this means is that we have been able to successfully support students one-on-one and in small groups throughout the district without having to focus so much on supporting students in whole classroom settings. However, there are still teachers and students who benefit from this model, and that's why we should keep it. In order to keep it, we will have to think of some recommendations for evaluation. The first one would be requiring an observation of every whole class match. This is due in part to the fact that there can be so many different elements and so many different interactions between one mentor and an entire classroom that it really is important to go into the classroom and physically see what activities, what conversations, what needs exist in the classroom in order for us to better support and understand the impact there. I think we can gain access to the BPS Teacher Climate Survey, which is a survey that teachers take to determine how they feel about their classroom, their students, the level of support that they get. We would be able to see what difference, if any, there is, and see what impact that really does make to have that additional support in the classroom. I also think we can adjust our end-of-year survey, elicit more specific information about the whole class match. What activities did the volunteer typically work on? How often were they working with individual students versus small groups? What level of flexibility and preparedness is it required of a match like this? And that will help us get to those answers. And finally, continue to identify more ways to measure the impact of the whole class match. This is something that is very important for us to think about if we do want to continue to keep this model and if we want to continue it the way that it is. And so I think that's something we need to prioritize. So as we know, Boston Partners in Education works with the Boston Public School District, but we work with the district at many different levels, from teacher to teacher, school to school, and overall district. In each connection of that district, I think there are ways in which we can improve our interactions and our support from the district. With teachers, we could provide them with a signed agreement form, which requires them to agree to certain expectations of the program. For instance, providing accurate information, answering check-ins, completing surveys, etc. Permission slips should definitely be accessible for us, and so we need to work with teachers to come up with a better process of how to get permission slips in order to track student information and impact and get access to their grades. Having a lesson plan. Each teacher could provide their volunteer academic mentor with a lesson plan, and this would really help them to understand what the classroom will be learning, what objectives there are in the classroom, and what to focus on from a week-to-week or month-to-month basis. At the school level, each school should have an appointed contact in which they will be expected to interact with us about school-level information. Classroom changes, schedule changes, teacher needs, student needs, information requests. I definitely think we can bump up our branding, let each school and the staff in each school know that we are there, how many mentors we have in the school, how many students we're supporting, how long we've been supporting that school. All of this is something that can be highlighted at the school level in order to gain further awareness of our organization. And finally, on-site orientation. This is something that should be very easy with our new performance partner pilot, where we can get enough volunteers to tour the school in which they'd be volunteering at, learn a little bit about the school culture, meet some staff members, and just get more comfortable with their school setting. At the district level, it is very important that we get a written, explicit query process from the district so that we can better inform our volunteers of what to expect with the background check process that can be provided to volunteers so that they know what to do or who to talk to if their query is still pending or if it has not passed. Strengthening partnership. We are solely working with the Boston Public School District. We have been doing this for almost 50 years. If the district doesn't recognize us and celebrate us and highlight us as being one of their most long-standing, committed partners available to any teacher and any student in the district, then they are doing their students and their teachers a disservice. And finally, access to student info. It is very difficult for us to talk about the impact we make on students. Whether that's social, emotional, or academic, we need to be able to provide that information to the world. We need to let the world know what we're doing and the changes and the difference that we're making in these children's lives. Permission slips, grades, attendance, all of that information should be more easily accessible to us in order for us to better serve the district. Finally, whole class. I do think we should keep the whole class program. I think that we need to adjust our student nomination form for the whole class program to elicit more information about what activities and what needs, what responsibilities the teacher is expecting. And that goes the same for check-ins and end-of-year surveys, requiring an observation of each match, both as match support to ensure that we understand the work that they are doing, but also to be able to evaluate our programs and understand the value of that. Determine methods of measuring impact. This is, once again, something very crucial, as right now we don't really have the same process as we do for our one-on-one and small group matches to be able to evaluate the impact of our program. And finally, marketing materials. Since the whole class program is slightly different from the other programs, I think it is very important to be strategic and creative about how we express this to both teachers and prospective mentors. We need to make sure that we're putting the right volunteers in the classroom that can support that type of a need, and we need to make sure that teachers understand what this looks like. So what am I leaving behind? Throughout this year, there have been some common themes that have stuck out that I think are very important for the organization moving forward. One of them would be community outreach and one-on-one meetings with organizations. There has been no better way for me to learn how to better serve our population of students, teachers, and schools than by meeting with organizations who are doing the same thing, whether it's mentoring, tutoring, or youth services. There are organizations that know what they're doing, and there's a lot of collaboration to be had and more impact to be made by learning from each other. Volunteer relationships. We all want strong, long-lasting relationships with our volunteers, and we want our mentors to be in the program and to have matches for a long time. This is something that we really need to prioritize moving forward if we do want to see stronger, long-lasting relationships. What makes a volunteer want to stay? What makes them want to leave? Another element that I found really important is structure and organization. By this, I mean spreadsheets, lists, written processes of every step of our programs and the work that we do, both internally and externally. I think that this will be helpful for any newcomer to the organization to understand what our work is like, but also it's sustainable so that we can improve and move forward in a direction that allows us to learn from what we've done in the past. Youth voice. Something we have a hard time with is including youth voice in our organization. There was a question posed to me a few months ago in a workshop, and the question was, what does success mean to your students? And this hit me really hard because, to be honest, I'm not sure we know the answer to that question. And of course, we're never going to know it for every student in the district. But I think by better understanding the students we serve, what they need, what they want, whether or not this support is something that they value, will be helpful for us and better improve our programs and the way that we serve our students. And so I really just want to say thank you. It has been an amazing whirlwind of a year for me. I have grown personally, professionally, and in so many other ways, and it is thanks to each and every one of the staff here at Boston Partners in Education. I would not be where I am today without you. You guys are all family to me, and I wish you the very best of luck in your years to come. Thank you so much for everything, and please do not hesitate to reach out if you need me.